Right, bit of F1 now, and there'll be no second F1 World Championship for Max Verstappen just yet because he failed to win in Singapore.
Well, let's get some more reaction on this now from ESPN's F1 General Editor, Nate Saunders. Morning, Nate. We had lots of rain yesterday and we had to wait for the race to start yesterday, but will Max Verstappen be too disappointed with how the race ended and that result?
Well, I think a guy like Max Verstappen's always pretty upset when he doesn't win, but I think in the grand scheme of things, he's not got much to be disappointed about. You know, he's with 5 races left, and he's still got a chance of winning the championship this weekend. It's a lot more likely this weekend that he wins in Japan. And also his teammate won, so I don't think in the grand scheme of things it was the worst thing. It wasn't like it was a result that has derailed his championship. So no, I don't think he'll be too upset. Maybe he just needed a good night's sleep, get over it, rest up from Singapore, and then, yeah, it's on to the next race this weekend.
Yeah, for Red Bull, though, as a team, how significant was Sergio Perez's victory?
Yeah, it was massively important. You know, Perez, he started the year really well. You know, he had a win in Monaco, and he probably should have won the Spanish Grand Prix as well, but actually had to give that win up to Verstappen. And then after that, his season kind of has just petered out a little bit. You know, Verstappen has improved and gone from strength to strength, but Perez has actually struggled for form on Sundays. So for him to do that when Max was, you know, had an off week, to stop Ferrari from winning a race as well was pretty important. So I think for both driver and for team, it was huge. And Red Bull signed Perez to a new deal earlier this season. So I think from that perspective, you know, it kind of vindicates that trust in him. And yeah, just going into, you know, the end of the season, I think they need him to be driving like that, just to wrap up the Constructors' Championship, because of course there's not just the Drivers' Championship in F1 to worry about. There's also the team's title as well, which Red Bull does look like it's kind of heading towards wrapping up as well.
Well, Verstappen could, of course, win the F1 Championship this weekend in Japan. Do you think that could actually be better for the team, given their links with Honda?
Yeah, I think so. So last year, Red Bull actually designed this really, really nice one-off car for the Japanese Grand Prix. It was this nice white car, had kind of the Japanese flag on it, and then we didn't race in Japan because of COVID. So they had to run that car in Turkey, which didn't quite feel the same. It was kind of a nod to their partnership with Honda. So Honda have officially withdrawn from F1 as an engine supplier, but they still work very closely with Red Bull. And I feel like they haven't fully had that credit maybe that they needed or they deserved for Max winning the championship last season. So yeah, I think that would be great for them. And if you look at where Honda and Red Bull both were when they made that partnership in 2019, it really didn't seem likely that they'd have caught Mercedes in 2 seasons. So it'd be a nice way to cap that partnership and cap the fact that in that time together, they really have just completely overtaken Mercedes and become the dominant force. So I think from a team perspective, Max not winning last weekend, I think from that PR perspective, didn't matter at all.
Well, let's shift our attention to Lewis Hamilton. It was a pretty disappointing day for him with his crash and 9th place finish as well. Where does he go from here?
Yeah, I mean, so there's one thing riding over Lewis's season at the moment, which is that in every year of his career so far, he's won a race, which is something that no driver has actually done. You know, when they've retired, there's always been one season, at least, even for the likes of Schumacher, Vettel, etc., where they haven't managed to win a race. Lewis currently is on track, or was on track, to break that. So I think that where he goes from here is just, you know, hoping and praying maybe that Mercedes have one more opportunity to win a race. This one, it looked like an opportunity to probably win a podium before that mistake. Yeah, he was chasing Sainz, and Singapore is the one place you don't want to get stuck behind another car. You know, it's very difficult to overtake there. He had a shot at pole on Saturday. That's what's fascinating about it. That could have been a completely different story had he got that. But I think that Lewis is in a good place right now, you know, compared to 6 months ago when he was really, really struggling. Obviously, the car was bouncing around like crazy at the start of the season, and his form was also bouncing around. You know, one weekend, you know, he'd do really well, one weekend he'd do really badly. So I think actually he's kind of rekindled some of that form we saw last year that saw him take the championship to that final lap in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, I think it would be a real shame for both him and Mercedes if he didn't get a win this season, because from where they were last season to now and what they've done to claw that gap back, you feel like Mercedes does kind of need that win. I don't think Lewis needs it in terms of his legacy or anything like that. But going into next season, when we think that Max and Red Bull might be, you know, way out ahead, I think it would be big for all of them. So, you know, it's hard to see where he might get that win with the circuits coming up. You know, Austin might be a good opportunity in 2 races' time, but we'll see. I don't think Lewis is kind of sitting there thinking, you know, do I want to leave F1 or anything like that? You know, he's actually said that the longer this year's gone on, the more he wants to carry on kind of into the long-term future. So I think he's in a good place, but it was a shame to see because I think that at the end could have been really spicy with him chasing Sainz down at the end.
Well, it's good news that he's not going anywhere. Certainly further down the grid, what stories are catching your eye as we approach the end of the season?
Well, there's one really big one this week that could actually have really huge implications in Formula One. So it doesn't sound like the sexiest piece of news off the bat. It's an audit of last year's budget cap. The F1 introduced a budget cap last year, but the results of that audit come out on Wednesday. Basically, the FIA will give every team what they call a certificate of compliance, which basically will say they were within the budget cap last season. There were reports at the weekend that 2 teams weren't in compliance of that. So the report said Red Bull and Aston Martin. Now, it's important to say that those aren't substantiated yet. We don't know whether that's true. But obviously, in terms of punishments, in terms of next steps, that would be really interesting, especially on the Red Bull side if they have breached that cap. Not only did they win the championship last season, they're on course to win both this year. Christian Horner was livid at the weekend at any suggestion his team had been part of any wrongdoing. But in a sport like Formula One, I mean, just to go back to Singapore, the top 3 last weekend in qualifying were split by half a tenth of a second. So even if you've breached a budget cap, so the budget cap is set at $140 million last year. It's been changed slightly this year for inflation. Even if you're in breach of that by a few million, other teams would certainly claim that that's a massively important disparity. Mercedes have clearly said that. Ferrari have clearly said that. They've both made kind of comments through the season that they said, well, our development has stopped. Red Bull have kind of carried on spending and we don't understand why, which was clearly referencing this audit that we've got coming up now. So the other interesting part of it is that the punishments available for the FIA are quite vague. In there, this was implemented last year. There's no precedent for what punishments could be. There's in the regulations, it says that points can be deducted. A team can be suspended from a few races. A team could be disqualified from a championship. So again, it depends, A, if a team has breached it, and B, if they have, the severity of it, because that's what the rules state. But Wednesday could be really interesting if one of those teams have, especially if it has been Red Bull. Obviously last season's championship was already kind of, the integrity of it was called into question in quite a big way. So this would be another kind of blow to that. And just as we thought the season was kind of winding down to a kind of a nice and peaceful resolution, this would really open up a hornet's nest, I think, because this budget cap was brought in to equalize the playing field a little bit and also to bring costs down. But if teams have breached it within its first iteration, then it's on really shaky ground straight away. So the FIA, racing's governing body, would be in a real kind of pickle in terms of what to actually do about that and how to actually police that going forward.
Nate, great to speak to you. Thank you.
Thanks.